Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. Joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant, and a Fox soccer researcher, and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Friday, July 21st in the year 2023, at least where we are here in Sydney?
I am doing well. You know, cleaned up Mosse lasts for about the first two pods during these World Cups, and then you start to see the unshaven look and the fatigue starts to set in.
I mean, listen, we just took the studio over from Jimmy Conrad and Company, and they're all dressed up and they're looking good, and we come on, and I did one game today, and then I went home, and I tried so hard to stay up, but there was a point where I did not out, so I'm still getting over the jet lag here. Listen, what we'd like to do with these daily shows after the games is give you just a very brief, we're not going to go crazy into the weeds, type of synopsis of what happened on and off the field, some of the stories that are going on, and of course, a peek into this world that is broadcasting a World Cup from a Fox perspective, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera, and in front of the camera, I guess it would be when it comes to David Mosse. Are you sleeping?
Still not sleeping that great.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's a bitch, man. It is difficult. It is very, very difficult. Listen, we want to thank State Farm for all of their promotion and all of their help as they put on these shows. And like I said, we will be doing these every single day after the day's events. And in particular, I will remind you that tomorrow, because for us it's tomorrow, the United States opens up their play here at the World Cup. And immediately after that U.S. game against Vietnam, we will have a live State of the Union. So definitely tune into that. All right, shall we go back? Because we didn't get to talk about the opening day. Only two games, obviously both of the host countries hosting and playing their games. From a host perspective, I guess it couldn't have gone better in terms of the results. From an actual entertainment perspective, it has to be said, and we call it like it is here on the State of the Union, not the most riveting type of soccer, nothing that you would put in a time capsule in terms of both the New Zealand game and the Australia game.
Yeah, any World Cup we cover, we always root for the host nations to do well, to galvanize the country, because that can really lift the whole tournament. And so we'll see if we get that here. For New Zealand, it was pretty historic, a 1-0 win over Norway. Hannah Wilkinson with the only goal. She is a former Tennessee Volunteer, so producer Sean was very excited about that. It is New Zealand's first ever Women's World Cup win. This is their 6th appearance. It was their 16th match at this stage, and they finally get a W, so it's a great start for them.
Great start for them. As you mentioned, a historic type of start given their futility in winning at World Cups. And you saw on the faces of the players after the game how important it was to them. I will say, because you mentioned Wilkinson and this association with the U.S., and another peek behind the curtain. Obviously, we are broadcasting to the United States, and we are the broadcasters of a World Cup that the United States is defending. And so, yes, things are going to be U.S.-centric. Are we going to give plenty of love and time to all the other teams and all the other stories that are there? Absolutely. But guess what? If you are watching our broadcast when it comes to Fox in the United States, it is going to be U.S.-centric. And we are going to make associations where they are with U.S. Players that have played in the U.S., players that have connections to the U.S., and we would not be doing our job because it is a connection. It is something to entice. It is something to interest people out there. It is TV 101. And I'm not saying people are complaining because I think everybody understands that, but leaning into a background playing for the University of Tennessee or something like that, that is a no-brainer. And the fact that she paid it off, by the way, after Carly Lloyd had her as her player to watch, not necessarily going out on a limb, was very, very nice.
And by the way, New Zealand might not have great World Cup pedigree, but Hannah Wilkinson has scored in 3 different World Cups now, so she
Never been done, men's or women's, from a New Zealand
Correct.
perspective.
The flip side of that result was Norway, which used to be one of the great powers in the women's game. They won the World Cup in 1995. They've struggled lately. In the last Euros, they lost a game 8-0 to England. I thought this tournament might be a chance for them to reestablish themselves, but terrible start for Ada Hegerberg and company.
They looked rudderless. And Should we be surprised, Mosse? Because they're coming off of a not good period, and a period where everyone said, "Oh, this is bad in terms of the Euros. This is bad in terms of where they are going." And I think everybody thought that they'll get it together for the World Cup. Now it's still early days, just one game, but this team did not look like they had any understanding of how they wanted to play. There was no ruthlessness when it came collectively or to the individual players. Ada Hegerberg, who obviously is a very, very big story, finally back at the World Cup after skipping the last World Cup in protest, she was non-existent. Not necessarily her fault, but keep in mind that she was at the height of her powers when she was last seen at the World Cup, and now we look at her. And, well, not at the height of her powers, but she was still young. But we missed that World Cup, and we thought, all right, finally returning. So they're going to have to get their you-know-what together going forward, because this throws this whole group, for those that predicted different things, into disarray. All right, let's switch it to Australia, the other hosts of this World Cup. They find a way to get the win in front of a crowd, 80,000 people, which was wonderful to see in terms of the support and the environment that was created playing against Ireland. Although I will say, there were a lot of Irish fans, and they were loud.
Absolutely. The Irish brought it. Right next to my hotel, there's an Irish pub, and it's been packed. So they're excited for this tournament, which is great to see. It's Republic of Ireland's first appearance. They're one of the 8 debutantes. And yeah, this match was played at the Stadium of Australia here in Sydney, which is the site of the final. So it's where all 32 teams want to end up on August 20th.
What do you think of Australia, ultimately? I mean, because this was a team that a lot of people said going into this tournament, not just hosting it, but they are a quality team. There is nothing that I saw that says that they have any chance of winning this World Cup.
I agree, not overly impressive. They did manage to do something that other teams have struggled with at this tournament, which is to convert a penalty. Steph Catley putting it away. She wore the captain's armband because Sam Kerr was missing. Unfortunately, injuries have become such a big part of this tournament in the lead up to it, and now early on with Sam Kerr picking up an injury that's going to knock her out, it sounds like, for the first 2 games.
The Sam Kerr news was kind of dramatic in the way that it dropped. Nobody knew that she was not going to play, let alone that evidently we find out now that she's going to miss the first 2 games of the World Cup at the minimum. And this was held back by the Australian team. And Tony Gustafsson, after the game, admitted that they knew that she was not going to play. And, he hemmed and hawed here and there, but ultimately he came out and said it was strategic in not giving away that information. And I understand it from a competitive standpoint. I understand holding that back because you don't want Ireland to be able to game plan for Australia that doesn't have Sam Kerr, because everything does flow through Sam Kerr. But it also means that next time Coach Tony says something, you're going to go, well, why should I believe you? And it was an interesting decision to do it in the moment, and for Sam Kerr to be out there in front of the press and talking about playing, even though they knew that this was not going to happen ultimately on the field because of the calf injury that he has suffered. We were talking earlier today on the set about injuries and calf injuries. And there's only so much that you can do. If it's, and knock on wood that it's nothing worse, but if it's a muscle injury, it just takes time. And you can do all of the stim, you can do all of the icing, you can do all of the stretching that you want, but it's going to take some time. I think there will come a point in this tournament where Sam Kerr just wants to get on the field. And you could see that she was destroyed by the fact that she wasn't able to participate in this moment. But the interesting thing is, that in previous World Cups, in the last World Cups, one of the knocks on Sam Kerr was that she didn't let the game come to her, and she was so jacked up about being in a World Cup that she almost was forcing everything. And you can see she's an intense player, and she plays with passion, and that's a wonderful thing. But in this moment, she's going to have to rely on the rest of her teammates to get her to a point to be able to play. And I know it must be incredibly frustrating for her not to be on the field. But they got it done in the first game. They got the 3 points. It doesn't matter how beautiful or ugly it ultimately was. All that matters is ultimately the result. So we move on to the day 2.
Let's do it.
All right, we are sitting in day 2. 3 games in day 2. We started it off on Big Fox with Norway and Nigeria and Canada. We're kind of like Bob and Doug McKenzie, by the way. You know who they are? You don't? Yeah. Jeez, my goodness. All right. Well, you can look it up online after it. In terms of the way that we look here, up there in the Great White North, it's a classic comedy bit from from many, many years ago. All right, so Canada, defending gold medal winners from the Olympics. Always Rans, Ina always there, never really able to get over the hump, boasting incredible talent, including arguably, and this is a debate that we got into on set, not arguably a great, but is she the GOAT when it comes to Christine Sinclair? And this is the first time that we are seeing them in the tournament. What did you make of Canada? Ultimately ended 0-0. Sinclair took a penalty, missed a penalty, and in doing so, obviously, had the chance to put her team up. I thought that Canada on the day was better. I thought that this was a chippy affair, as they say. I thought that there was a point where Quinn could have gotten thrown out of the game. At a point she came in with cleats up, and then Alexi, even right after it, I think also escaped. And I think this referee kind of let everybody play, and that's at times a good thing, but I think at times it got a little bit out of hand. But it's the first game, and you don't want to do anything. You don't want to kick anybody out. Although ultimately, when the game ended, there was still an ejection. Thoughts on the game?
I mentioned the penalty kick woes at this World Cup. Even the all-time leading scorer in international history wasn't immune to it, Christine Sinclair. And, we had a shot at history because had she converted, she would have been the first player to score in 6 different World Cups, man or woman. But alas, she was denied.
I think she's going to get a goal at some point.
Although she is playing a different role now, more withdrawn on this Canadian team, so all the service isn't really funneled towards her. But, yeah, I agree with you. Not overly impressive from Canada, but not that concerning either because Nigeria is a difficult team to play against. So I think Canada will be fine. I still see them advancing from this group.
If Christine Sinclair were to lead this Canadian team to a World Cup, where would she fall in the conversation for GOAT? I mean, we talked on our studio show about that, and the parallels to a Messi finally getting that moment and leading his Argentina team to a World Cup are certainly there. And Christine Sinclair, her first appearance was in 2000. For Canada. That's how long she has been around. And she's continued to score goals, and she'll be the first to admit that the one thing missing from her resume, and I guess from her legacy, is that World Cup.
Although she is perceived to be a bit of a compiler, a bit of a Hank Aaron, I don't think people view her as...
What does that mean? A
somebody
compiler?
that's just consistent and racks up some impressive overall totals, but at no point in her career was she viewed as this incredible transcendent talent on the levels of a Marta, Mia Hamm, players like that. Would you agree?
Well, we were on. I was talking to Carly Lloyd earlier, and I made the point that if you're a Mia Hamm or a Carly Lloyd for that matter, playing for the U.S. is a different type of proposition than playing for Canada. And I'm not saying that Canada isn't a good team, and at times Canada hasn't beaten the U.S. But I guess the question then would be, if Sinclair had actually played for the U.S., she would have been, Abby Wambach type of figure.
I was going to say, in terms of just as a pure goal scorer, would you put her above Abby because playing for Canada, you don't get as great a service as you do playing for
I do give greater credit to somebody that was able to do it with a much lesser of a supporting cast than she did. I think if she were to lead this team, and she would have to, on her shoulders to a World Cup, you could absolutely make the argument that she is the greatest of all time for what she has done over the span of the last 25 years. But most importantly, taking a team in a World Cup a la Maradona in 1986, putting it on the back and bringing it, or I guess for Messi, 6 months ago. Yeah, absolutely. But ultimately, they don't get the job done. And from a Nigeria perspective, this is a good result. I thought that at times Nigeria was interesting. At times it was sloppy. I think that they absolutely could have let up goals. But this is this is a wonderful result for Nigeria coming out of the chute here. You good with that?
I buy it.
Okay, all right. Let's see. Switzerland and the Philippines. First time we've seen the Philippines here at the World Cup.
You've talked about the American connections. The Philippines, 18 members of their squad were born in the United States, including 8 starters. So they've really leaned into that. We made a big point of it tonight. But they go down 2-0 to Switzerland.
And that is a huge story. I mean, the Filipina Americans unite type of situation that is this team. And it's by design and it's out of necessity in order to be able to compete. And proof is in the pudding. They have qualified for a World Cup. But we always have this talk about what a national team player is and how do you define a national team player and dual nationals and all this kind of stuff and the representation in your history and all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, it comes down to whether you have a passport or not. But there is a sentiment, and it'd be interesting to see what the Philippine nation, when they are looking at this team, how they are able to relate to these young women who are, many of them and almost all of them, coming from a very different place and not actually coming from the Philippines. I think that there's a pride no matter what, and the culture that exists in the United States has been there forever. And in this situation, you get the best possible soccer players that have a Filipino passport, and you put them out there.
You mentioned that you had a big debate with Carly Lloyd on set. There was also a big debate over the Swiss penalty, which led to their first goal, Ramona Bachmann. I thought it was a stone-cold penalty. Heather O'Reilly thought it was a stone-cold penalty. Stu Holden was not having it. He thought it was a terrible call.
The placement of your foot matters, okay? So if I am able to get in front of you and you swipe at me with your foot, you kick at me with your foot, thinking that I am kicking the ball, and in the intervening millisecond, I put my body and/or my foot in front of it, then in that moment, you are actually not kicking the ball. Your intent to kick the ball really becomes irrelevant if you're going through somebody's body. And so I actually understand what both of these, whether it's Stu or Heo, are saying when they look at it. I watched it again and again and again, and I don't think anybody would have cared if they hadn't called that. But especially in this day of VAR, you look back and it looks like the defender doesn't see the player coming, is just swinging through. And it's not looks like, it actually does. Swings through and actually hits the back of the player who had gotten pole position, if you will.
And for what it's worth, Sean Sullivan referred to it as a soft penalty in the rundown, so he seems to be in the Stu Holden camp.
Yeah, so what's your definition of a soft penalty? Just means that there is debate about it?
Yeah, light contact, could have gone either way.
I don't know. I did like, we saw a bunch of penalties today, and we saw a bunch of VAR today, and I can't believe it's taken us this long to actually have the referees announce what is going on. I think it adds an element, obviously, of information that is missing. I also think it adds an element of theater. And now you're seeing some of these referees recognize that they are kind of on stage, and they are talking to the world. And there's a theatrical part of it that I think is going to be interesting as it develops and goes on. And the pauses and how the jargon that you use, the pauses, and like I said, the theatrical way in which you ultimately announce that decision. So I thought that was cool.
Now, can we get to the team I most want to talk about that was involved in the final match today?
I suppose so. All right, so Spain, we finally see the Spaniards coming up against Costa Rica.
I was absolutely mesmerized by their passing. You could ask people in the control room. I was having an orgasm in there. I thought I was watching Manchester City.
Oh, God, that's a really tight space over there in our control room.
And when you take a step back and you think about the fact that 15 players mutinied, 3 came back. Of the 12 that didn't, included in that is Sariegi, who was their leading scorer in qualifying, Patricia Guijara, who just scored 2 goals for Barcelona in the Champions League final, Mapi Leon, arguably their best defender, Sandra Pan is their starting goalkeeper. So the caliber of players they're without. And then Alexia Putellas, the best player in the world, is injured to the point where she wasn't able to start. And yet they still have enough talent to be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in this tournament. It is astonishing how much talent they've amassed in a short period of time here. It makes me think that had there not been any injuries and had there not been a mutiny, they would have clearly arrived at this tournament as co-favorites alongside the United States.
So do you think that they've gotten over the hump? Because last time we saw Spain, there was this, I think, collective, and I think you would share this view, that they were not quite ready for prime time. The possession or the intent to have that possession was there. And now you're telling me that you're seeing a possession with purpose.
No, there were some worrying signs in that regard tonight. They had over 40 shots. This should have been a U.S.-Thailand scenario. There should have been like 13-0. It was only 3-0. And so it goes to show you there's still an issue there. You go back to the Euros against England. They played against a healthy England team in England and played them off the park for 80 minutes. That game shouldn't have even been close, but they let England hang around. England nicked an equalizer late, ended up advancing. And so that is a potential problem for Spain down the road.
Yeah, I think Danielle Slayton, I was watching the game and she was doing it. I think at one point she said, if there is a critique and a criticism, it's that there is still a lack of ruthlessness, either individual up top or collectively in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net. And it's interesting that you used orgasm, because there are those that would say that it's just kind of a sitting around pleasuring yourself type of scenario when you are watching these teams that just put passes and passes and passes. And not for nothing, but this is nothing new when it comes to Spain. So they are, in essence, kind of living the history and the culture and the style and the ideal of Spain. But you were, I guess, were you just amazed at their ability to do it, or are you just mesmerized when people are able to keep the ball?
It's just so silky smooth, some of the passing movements, the combinations. I've never seen that before in the women's game. I think they're really, this is like women's soccer 2.0. They're elevating it to a different place.
All right.
You're not having this.
Yeah, Mosse loves Spain, whatever, I mean, it's a masturbatory thing. Is that what's happening here? All right, whatever. Okay, let's finish it off here with preview. And look, we're going to have all sorts of stuff tomorrow. It is a big day tomorrow. Obviously, the first game with the United States playing against Vietnam on the eve of the first game, Mosse. How are you feeling, having seen not everybody play, but seeing some teams play and gotten a feel for what this World Cup is?
Well, on the podcast we did with Heather O'Reilly, I highlighted the fact that Vietnam had a close loss against Germany, and maybe that meant they weren't going to be as easy an opponent for the U.S. But I neglected to realize that they lost 9-0 to Spain. The more I've dug into it, I'm kind of back to thinking that this is going to be a Thailand scenario. I think the U.S. is going to lay the lumber down and really make a statement, lay down a marker for the rest of the field.
Vlad Kondonovsky was actually asked in the press conference today if there was going to be another type of Thailand situation, and Vladko's never going to say anything, particularly newsworthy. But okay, I mean, look, if it's another Thailand thing, then do it and score the goals. And a reminder, I don't know how many remember from the last World Cup, but there was a lot of debate and disagreement and discussion as to was this the proper thing to do? Were they being good sports? Was it in the spirit of the game? This is a World Cup, and while there are plenty of stories out there that are going to be about the pathways and the impact that these players and these teams can have, this is about competition. This is about sports competition. And you can certainly have empathy for an opponent, but ultimately this is about winning. And when it comes to the U.S., this is about doing something historic, which is winning 3 games in a row. So if it turns out that this is a blowout tomorrow against Vietnam, then so be it. And you score and you keep scoring. Because if you don't do that, one, from a practical perspective, you could end up not winning the group, and that would be problematic. 2, from an actual sports perspective, I believe that the most disrespectful thing that you can do is take your foot off the gas. And if you're going to kick my ass, then kick my ass and don't stop until the final whistle. I believe that the U.S. team has that type of mentality, and that is the right mentality to have going into this game. I don't know if it's going to be another Thailand, but Vietnam certainly has their their work cut out for them. We will be bringing you all the action. Like I said, it's going to be a fun day tomorrow. Are you all set for tomorrow, Mosse? Are you ready? Are you prepared? Are you ahead of the game when it comes to all of your work and all of your different things you have to do?
I am ready. We have a 2-hour pregame.
Yes,
it is
we
written, and all the graphics are good to go, so I'm looking forward to it.
We will be getting you set, not just for the actual game, but for what is to come throughout this tournament. And obviously the first time that we are seeing this team as they go, like I said, for a historic 3 World Cups in a row. Never been done, men's or women's. We will be with you every single day after all the games. Although tomorrow after the U.S. game, we will have our State Farm podcast immediately after the U.S. game. So definitely do that. Obviously, after the post game that we will have with the game, and then I'll run over here to the set, and we will give you the State of the Union that you want and that you deserve. Anything to the folks before we go, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, listen, we will talk to you again tomorrow. Big day tomorrow. Think good things for the United States on and off the field. We will see you then. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.